Hi guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Val and welcome to day 10 of our 200 days of Psalms. And today's psalm is actually Psalms chapter 10, which talks about how David was complaining to God about the success of the wicked, and he ended up praying to God that he would protect him and that he would vindicate him. And so yeah, let's get into it. In verse 1, we see David starts off these psalms by asking God, "Why do you stand afar off, O Lord, and why do you hide your face from me, O Lord, in times of trouble?" Got to a point where David felt as if God was so far off and he couldn't hear him, and he was just not there in his times of trouble, and he was kind of calling out to God like, "Where are you, God, in this situation? Where are you when I actually need you?" David was so troubled with God's silence because he would see the wicked men who would not even seek God, who were living in sin, and who would actually not have God in their thoughts, that they were actually prospering. And he got to a point where he had to raise a complaint to God. And in verse 5, we see David continues to complain by saying that not only is this wicked man prospering, but the hand of God upon his life for judgment is nowhere to be seen. David also continues to describe the wicked man as a man who was full of sin, that everything that they would utter, everything that they would say in their tongue or in their mouth was just not right. It was just wicked. And he also said that this man wouldn't care about the innocent or the poor. They were so greedy and selfish of themselves, and it seemed like these wicked men were troubling David so much that he was actually raising a complaint to God. And in verse 12, we see David continues to complain and to God, and he's like, "God, arise up and raise your hand upon the humble and remember these people who are being oppressed by the wicked man." Towards the end now, we see that David is now becoming quite confident in God's help towards the humble, towards the poor, those who are actually innocent, because he recognizes now that God can help them, that God actually hears them and sees them, and that God is actually their vindicator. Because we see him say, "Break out the camp of the wicked or evil man, seek their wickedness, and until you find none." David concludes this psalm by referring to God as an eternal king, because he now became confident in God as his vindicator, as the one who had helped him conquer the times that he was in trouble, because he was in a season. There was a time he was in a season where people were trying to occupy his land when he was king, and they were trying to remove him as king by force. And because he knew God had a track record, he was now becoming confident that God will still help him in this trouble. But his main concern was, why is it that these wicked people are actually living okay? They are being blessed, they are prospering. And we see that in our generation today. Like, sometimes we tend to see that people who are actually not in salvation, they tend to live well, they are okay, we think they're prospering, but sometimes you see most people who are actually in salvation are not doing so well. But this is actually it's like a confidence that we need to have, that those people are actually not in God's will. And because David constantly depended on God, we saw that he constantly experienced victories. Because in this life we will have challenges, we will experience so many things, but sometimes we may think of prospering as the material aspect. But in this sense, David was trying to show us that his wealth was actually in God. His prosperity was actually in depending on God's victory and assurance that God is our defender, God is our help in times of need. And I think David is a good example of that. And my prayer is that we may never get to a point where we compare ourselves to the people of the world, because these people are actually not living in God's will. And when we are walking in salvation, we tend to go through seasons where we struggle, we suffer, but it's part of partaking of Christ. And so yeah, that's all I had for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you tomorrow, and bye.